So you get longitudinal videos. You get before, you get the 2-week video after the surgery is done, even if they're in temporaries, even if their occlusion is slightly off, even if they're 2 millimeters open VDO, whatever. That is the time their euphoria around this is the most.
I had a couple come in who did implants together, and we got an after photo. And then I put as a title, "Those who do arches together, stay together." And I thought that was like a really funny photo.
People were irate. This is all a dentist Facebook group, right? So dentists are just going crazy in there. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, why is this dude doing this? Welcome back to another episode of the Full Arch Advantage podcast. I'm your host, Gary Bird. I'm the founder of SMC National, where we help offices just like yours level the playing field against the big guys so you can grow the way that you want. But you can't grow if you're struggling to add full arch and you don't know up from down. And today, I'm so thankful for the experience that I got to have where I hosted Dr. Daniel and Dr. Taher, who have been doing full arch for some time now. And they were very, very transparent and very upfront about how to grow in full arch. And we're going to talk about the mistakes that they made around marketing, pricing, clinically, treatment planning. I mean, these guys just were very upfront. And this is something that I think is really missing in the full arch space. So if you really want to learn from people who've actually done it and are actually going to be transparent with you, they're the guys that you're going to want to listen to right now. This is going to blow your mind. Some great tips in it. Stay tuned. All right, we are live and I'm excited to have this conversation today. Right before we pressed record, Dr. Taher said something that I really liked. He said, full arch is kind of like the triangle offense. It's where you have to have all three parts working. You have to have your administrative, you have to have your marketing, and you have to have your clinical all working together. If any of those break down, the whole offense breaks down. And as we know, a lot of people have tried to run the triangle offense before, but only a few people have done it very successfully for long periods of time. And I feel like full arch is in that same boat. You've probably noticed this before, but this podcast is unsponsored. What that means is we don't get paid to do it, but we want to bring you the best information possible. So how do we make sure that this content stays on the air? We need you to like and subscribe. Wherever you're at, whatever you're listening on, just give us a thumbs up or subscribe. And that helps us out so much. I know that you probably haven't done it. So I'm just going to sit here and wait until you do. 95% of our listeners have not subscribed to our podcast. So go ahead and do it now. Don't make this awkward. All right, good. Back to the show. So one of the things that we said that we were going to focus on today is what are the things that we've done wrong over the years? And I love that topic because number one, it takes humbleness to have that conversation, right? But let's be honest, everybody's been there. Anybody who's doing full arch successfully didn't start day one being the perfect clinician, right? And the perfect operation and the perfect marketing. So I would love to start there of like, let's talk about some of the things that people have done wrong and how they've gotten that wrong and then how to make them better. And so we can get on the right track. So Taher, do you want to Dr. Taher, do you want to kick us off with that and we can start having a conversation around that?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I watched The Last Dance on Netflix. And so, the whole Jordan thing, the triangle offense. And so that's why it's just like top of mind. So, a lot of us who've been to training have the clinical skill set to do the work. So we're going to be under the assumption that whoever's listening, you got the clinical chops, you know how to do it. Your surgical team knows how to do it. And you know how to either provisionalize and temp an arch, or that you have a lab person who comes in and takes care of it. But where the system really breaks down is, okay, well, how do I market for it? We just started doing this procedure, so I'm not going to spend $35,000 a month on marketing companies. So how do I find these patients right now, build up the revenue in the business, and then do it from a smart business perspective where then you can use that revenue and the profit that you're generating from the first full, couple of cases in order then to build your program and to invest in marketing and to get things to the next level.
That's really smart.
What I always like to advocate is pulling your denture codes in your practice. So if you're a GP practice, pull up every single code that's associated with extractions, partials, dentures, and then run a list, pull up their panos, and then do some kind of promotion for the patients. When we train docs, oftentimes what they're going to tell us is they don't feel confident enough to charge $25K for an arch when it's their first 10 to 20 arches. So what we advise is just assume, you're going to spend 15 to get the case done. And the reason why it's 15 and not really like 7 or 8, like it is for proficient offices, is you got to allocate that there's more doctor chair time So you got to heat and cool your facility more. You got more payroll hours. You got more phone call hours, right? You got to look at the business as a whole, as an ecosystem, and understand that your time is very valuable and you're going to be spending more time with these patients on your first 10 to 20. So let's just assume it's double. You're spending $15K per arch. Charge your patients $15,000 for the arch. And then you can get a whole list of patients signed up off of the patients who are patients of the practice, and then get going.
And I want to call out too here, it's not just the marketing expense that you're not paying for here to generate those leads. You don't have to have somebody who's managing those leads, right? Because you can basically go through and manage those leads yourself because you already know the patient. You also don't have to have a specialized salesperson that has the training on how to sell these things because you're basically selling them, right? You're like, hey, patient Betty, looks, over the years, we've done all this treatment and you've said you wanted a more permanent solution. This is something that we have for you here now. So you're removing a lot of costs so you can learn the process, right? I really like that a lot.
Yeah. The one last thing I want to add to that is you don't do reduced fee prices because you're learning a procedure. Yeah. So in the eyes of the patients, what you want to say is, hey, you know what? This is something new and what we know now. So it's not like you didn't ever know something that everyone always knew. So what we know now is this, and this is an option you have available. If you'd like to be a part of it, we're going to do a marketing campaign. So if you'd like, we can get pictures beforehand, videos beforehand. And what we do is we track your journey throughout this whole process. So you get longitudinal videos. You get before, you get the 2-week video. So at 2 weeks after the surgery is done, even if they're in temporaries, even if their occlusion is slightly off, even if they're 2 millimeters open VDO, whatever, that is the time their euphoria around this is the most. And so get your testimonial video at 2 weeks, because that's when they're still like glowing, tears will come, family members have that like really strong impact. And so get that video. Then of course, when you get into final zirconias, all that other stuff down the line, get those videos. And if you can, get a significant other in some of the videos. And it's cool to watch a reveal of the significant other watching their partner or spouse or whoever getting their teeth and looking at that. So you get 2 different camera angles and you build your Rolodex of marketing content from different angles, different videography things, different before and after pictures. And you do that on your first 10 cases. So yeah, maybe you didn't make a profit on 10 cases and maybe you volunteered your time pro bono, but you broke even and you designed this entire robust marketing campaign that you can take to a professional group. And they can run with that and they can use that everywhere. And that's a really good way to just jumpstart the program in the very beginning. And I wish I would have done it that way, but that's the way we advise people to do it. And that's the way they tend to get it off the ground a little bit more quickly these days.
That's awesome. Daniel, any additional thoughts on that? And before we move on to the next topic, I have another question around some of those videos.
Yeah. So I had a dude talking about all these marketing pictures and stuff. I had a couple. So last year when I opened my startup in June, and last year I did just over 40 arches, which I was really happy about. So I took kind of the opposite approach of what Dhoon did because he did a practice acquisition, right? Where he acquired a practice and grew a full arch implant program from it, as to where I just spent, like $2.6 million and bought all the equipment and everything, but I had the clinical skills to do the cases right from the bat, right? So then I had one of those triangles done. But I had a couple come in who did implants together, and they did theirs in June of last year, and we got an after photo. And then I put as a title, "Those who do arches together stay together." And I thought that was like a really funny photo. So I posted that one on all of the social marketing.
I love that. Okay, so I got a question for you. So Reese, I'm going to tell a little backstory. People will appreciate the backstory, and then it'll give some context to how the idea came up. So recently there was a marketer. I won't name him because that's what he wants. He wants attention. And so I'm not going to give it to him. But he posted a video in a big Facebook group, very popular. And a Facebook group I'm very involved with. Has about 50,000, 60,000 members. And he posted and he said, the reason that you're not growing with full arches the way you want is because you're greedy dentist and you're charging too much. And he made a whole video about the greedy dentist versus the non-greedy dentist. And he said, if you just lower your fees by $5,000, you'd see way more patients, blah, 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 right? And so people were irate. I mean, this thing has like 500 comments. This is all a dentist Facebook group, right? So dentists are just going crazy in there and I'm sitting here and I'm like, why is this dude doing this? And I started really thinking about it. Like, I'm like, is this just for attention to gain leads? It's not a good way to like win friends and influence people. Right. And so he, what I ended up doing, I saw it later, he took all the comments from the dentist and then turned it into ads. So he was really just testing ad copy against dentists. And I was like, that was kind of smart, but not the most ethical way to do that. But, So anyways, as I was sitting there, one of the topics that kept coming up is that the dentist kept saying is like, hey, bro, one of the things you're not taking into account about doing full arch is the risk when it fails. Like you're just factoring like the cost of the implant and a little bit of chair time, and then you should only have to charge this much. And it's like, no, there's massive risk, and these cases can fail later. And over and over again, I've done multiple shows of dentists who they are literally running their business on repeats. Like that's a common thing now where it's just like, yeah, I do 10 arches a month and the majority of them are repeats from other dentists that failed 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And that's coming up over and over and over again. So here's what I'm thinking. I've never seen this ad before. I'm sure maybe somebody out there has done it, but I would love your guys' thought on it. Running an ad that has a patient that you did a redo on, which I'm sure you guys have done before, and having them say, you know what? I tried to save money the first time and it didn't work. And it ended up failing. And I ended up at a second dentist and it worked. I'm thankful that I came here. I'm not thankful that I had to pay that. And then giving some doctor context in there, some clinical context. What are your thoughts on an ad like that? How do you think that would do now in the day and age that we're at, where full arch is at, and a lot of people who are doing it the wrong way?
Yeah, I think it's a very good idea. I think if you asked me that like 10 years ago, I say, no, you're a little too early for the idea. Yeah. But you're right. I mean, there are so many people doing full arch right now. And it's not that they mean to do it wrong or they mean to like make mistakes, but just some simple concepts are being skipped in terms of how they approach the case. And again, I know we're not necessarily going to dive into the clinical, but at the end of the day, I think once they get more proficient, they're going to start to fix cases they started with, just like I am right now. I did cases, 8 years ago that I'm touching up today. So with that said, I think it's a really great idea to market to that. The only negative I would have in my head is that anyone who's not a repair case, a patient who's not a repair case would see it and be like, oh, this guy's more. So that's the only negative I could see.
Yeah, that's a good point. I love that.
Though I love the concept.
Yeah, it's going to become more and more common, right? Because there's going to be more and more failures as more and more people do full arch. It's just, that's the way that it goes. So there's definitely going to be a market for that. All right. So the first thing is around growth is working with the people that you already have. So that way you don't have to spend the money on lead reps and salespeople and marketing and on and on and on and on, and learning some of the operational things. What would you guys say, Taher, if you want to kick us off on the second topic? What would be the second thing that you would say, hey, this was something that I learned the hard way and it would be an easy fix. If I was to start over today, I would do this differently?
Yeah. So marketing dollars for this specific procedure, and I don't know if this is 100% accurate, what I'm going to say is what I believe at least. I think that generation of a lead in full arch for dentistry is the most expensive lead to generate out of like any other thing for like GPs or ortho or whatever. To make the phone ring for this specific procedure for a qualified lead can be very expensive. And so one thing I wish I did better from day one is have an Excel sheet that's independent of my software, like Open Dental, that I would track these patients. And then some people have, is it RCM?
A CRM.
Yeah, CRM. Yep. Thank you. Yep. Yeah, I knew I was saying that wrong.
Yeah, you're close.
CRM or some kind of thing where you're tracking your patients, but not just name and we touched base. I would track it based on complexity level.
Yeah.
And say, hey, this is an easy case. This is a moderate case. This case needs zygomas. This case needs pterygoids. This case needs laterals, whatever, and build out my Excel sheet from day one, because making the phone ring is super expensive. However, once you've already accumulated the patient's email and their cell phone number, you can always touch base with them later.
Yeah.
You can put them into some kind of implant funnel where you're giving out more content and more like information when you start doing your patient education dinners, and those don't have to bring 60 people to the table. You could educate 6 people and close 3 of them. Sometimes the more intimate setting is a better setting nonetheless, but now you know who to call. And then also when you're marketing to those patients, you kind of can see geographically where they're coming from, and then you can start dropping print in those specific areas. So there's a lot of different things you can do, but you need the data and you need to hold it. And then the younger, more immature version of myself was like, well, I'll just give someone else money. They'll track it. They'll do it. They'll make the phone ring. But making the phone ring is expensive. Calling someone who's already called your practice is like the lowest hanging fruit. And so I'm touching base on some of my old Excel sheets, and we're converting a lot of cases.
I love that. Any thought? I have a question for that too, a clarifying question around that. But any other thoughts on that, Daniel, before I ask that question?
I started doing that sort of tracking about a little too late. I probably started doing it about 4 months into it. That I noticed that I wasn't doing it, right? Because you have to target all the ads, so you need to know where that patient actually came from, which campaign in general, right? That's why a CRM is so viable to have, like so you can actually track things in your open dental. Did they come from the magazine? Did they come from your TV? Did they come from Google ads or Facebook ads? Or where do they actually come from, so you can stop spending money unwisely, right? Rather just these broad zip codes, because you just start draw a giant circle and start throwing money at it. It doesn't work like that. You have to actually find which circles to throw the money at, so you actually get a better ROI, right?
100%.
So I definitely didn't do that off the bat. It took me about 4 months to figure that portion out. And then the way that I marketed for the implants changed substantially within the first 3 months of me opening, because I tried to have my marketing company do both my general dental and my implant marketing. But what I quickly realized is they can't do that. But you still have to build the organic search and SEO at the same time as the Google ad presence being run by like a marketing company as well. So there's so many different intricacies inside of this, right? And if you just spend all the money there, hopefully you have the clinical skills to do it, right?
Yeah.
So that's why Dhoon's tip, the take it a little bit slower, is such a great tip.
Yeah, I love that. And we actually, if you didn't watch the last show, go watch the last show that I did with Dr. Daniel, because we actually went into great detail about like why you have to have 2 separate campaigns and even if it's 2 separate marketing companies or the same marketing companies, but 2 different totally conversations. If you try to blend it all together, it's going to turn into a hot mess, because it's radically different kinds of marketing, and they're different buying cycles and different avatars, totally different. And you can actually hurt yourself more than you help yourself if you combine those. So go check that one out. That was really, really good. He dropped a lot of knowledge on that. But going back to your initial point about leads being expensive versus cheap, compared to other dentistry, I love this because I track all this stuff, right? So we have CRMs that integrate with the PMS, and so we track this stuff meticulously. And I wanted to get it clarified. I don't think you're wrong. I think I just wanted to clarify. So generating a lead for Full Arch is actually really easy. One of the biggest keywords in dental is around implants. It's just like, and it's because it's a research keyword, right? So if I want a dentist, I might search one Google search dentist if I want GP, right? And maybe 2. If my wife needs a pediatric dentist, she might do 1 or 2 Google searches. For implants or Full Arch, I might do 50 or 100 over and over and over again in different variations. So it's very easy to generate a lead, and it's actually really, really cheap. And I think, and this is what I wanted to clarify on, but the cost to drive that person into your door, it's astronomical. So when you're saying that we track lead versus qualified lead versus cost per appointment versus getting that patient into the chair versus CAC, cost to acquire the patient that actually buys from you, that's when you get in. I've seen people up into $5,000, $7,000 to drive that person through the door, where to drive like a GP patient's like $300, but it might be $100 to generate a GP lead versus it might be $10 to generate a Full Arch lead. So it's actually cheaper. And I'm curious of your opinion on this or what you've seen, but what I've seen is generating a Full Arch lead is really cheap, really easy, but generating a Full Arch patient into the door that wants to buy treatment, it's very expensive and very hard. Am I on the right track there with you? Are we on the same page?
Yeah, Gary, I totally appreciate you bringing up like helping me like clarify my comment. So yes, the leads are super easy to generate in Full Arch if you market for it. And what can happen is, so there's two practices out there. There's practices that are at capacity, and there's practices that have open chair time and open consult rooms and whatnot, right? So depending on what type of practice you are, is going to depend on how you want to schedule your patient. And if you're an office that's at capacity, well, you don't have the luxury of just having any lead coming through the door. So now there's a qualification process that needs to occur ahead of time. And then as you get to the lead that's like a high credit score, they can financially afford it. They also have a terminal dentition or a candidate for the procedure. The cost of acquisition of a qualified lead is very expensive. Then there's also different marketing I've done over the years where it's like, hey, I'll just meet everyone. I'm going to shotgun approach this thing. I'm going to take all the noodles, throw it all against the wall and see what sticks. And then what ends up happening is your phones get flooded with phone calls. And then you think, hey, like we're doing amazing. Like this is awesome. My marketing is working. Then all these calls come in. So I had to hire more people to answer the phones. I had to change my phone tree around. So when someone said press 1, it would go to implants. If you're a new patient, press 2. And then if you're an existing patient, press 3. So then the 1 for implant would route to a specific person who was taking those leads, which I would recommend everyone do nonetheless.
Yeah, 100%.
But then I had to hire specific people just for the intake of these really deep, long conversations about why they are in the situation they are in. And if they're an unqualified lead, then that 20 minutes of a payroll time for that person to take the phone call, to have that empathetic conversation, to then get the patient scheduled, to then have the patient not show up is super costly. But then if you can set up your phone tree in a way where more qualified leads are calling, and then you're only scheduling more qualified people, well, then at the same time, like granted, you might only do like 2 implant consults a day versus 8. But the conversion rate is way higher.
Conversion rate, yeah. Because you can get 8 people into the chair that don't have the financial ability to be able to afford it, that all need it, right? Like that's not hard. They're everywhere. It's getting the people who need the treatment, who qualify clinically and have the ability to be able to afford it. One of the things I would love your thoughts on this. So a couple things that we've seen work really well is one, driving those leads. So when they say leads, some dentists get really mad about that. They're like, they're people. I've had people yell at me online and I'm like, yeah, I know they're people, but I can't call them people because then you don't know what I'm talking about. They're like, well, we call them patients. And I'm like, well, they're not patients yet. They're at their house. They don't even know who you are. So I call them a lead and they like, call them potential patients. And I'm like, that's okay, whatever. So potential patients that want to come into your office, we have them fill out a form to see if they qualify, right? And to see clinically if they qualify and financially if they qualify and all those kind of things, to have a quick conversation with them. I call it quick, but to your point, it can be very long. But then we use the 3 C's to see if they qualify. So do you have the credit? Do you have the cash? Or do you have the co-signer to be able to come in so you can have the next conversation with the doctor? That's how we like to qualify. How do you guys qualify them? How do you work through that, or how do you train your team? Because I know that's a big one that people get really lost on.
In a very similar way. So yes, you can use companies like iSoft Credit Pool. You can use a company like Cherry where it doesn't affect the patient's credit. So then you can pull the credit, find out what they qualify for. And then like, let's say you're someone who's like, okay, look, I'm not going to not meet someone because of credit, right? I will do extractions and partials